Hello, everyone. Friends, what's the single most important thing right now in this tense, anxious, and extremely dangerous situation? Without a doubt, it's the fresh statement from the President of the United States, Donald Trump. He said it clearly and without any hedging. I'm not afraid to send American troops onto Iranian soil. Previous presidents trembled at the very thought of a ground operation. I won't have shaking knees. These aren't just words for domestic consumption. This is a powerful, aggressive, in-your-face signal aimed straight at Tehran. The Iranian leadership was counting on the idea that after the first strikes, Washington and Jerusalem would quickly back off. The regime would survive and even grow stronger. But Trump is deliberately escalating. He's raising the stakes, going all in, and I've warned about exactly this many times in previous streams. A ground operation is one of the most radical, but at the same time realistically possible, tools for regime change in a country under this level of pressure. Alongside that, you have bottom-up revolution, a military coup from the top, or an elite palace conspiracy. But let's be brutally honest. I'm not ready to seriously consider a full-scale American invasion of Iran right now. Why not? There are several very heavy reasons. First, we still have no credible evidence that the Pentagon and the White House were genuinely preparing for such a scenario, at least not on the scale of Iraq 2003 or Afghanistan. Second, Iran's geography is a true nightmare for any invading army. Enormous territory, rugged mountains, vast deserts, narrow passes perfect for ambushes. Third, and probably the most critical, potential American casualties could reach hundreds, and in the worst case, even thousands of killed and wounded. And all of this is happening with midterm congressional elections in November 2026, not that far away. If Democrats take control of both chambers, for Trump, that could be a political death sentence. End of his term, fresh court cases, possibly even impeachment proceedings. He understands that better than anyone. Polls are already painting a core picture. A majority of Americans are firmly against another major war in the Middle East. And that makes perfect sense. Trump was elected precisely as the America First candidate who promised to pull troops out of Afghanistan, stay out of new quagmires, and stop pouring trillions of taxpayer dollars into foreign conflicts. Yes, he's now explaining to his base that Iran poses a direct threat to U.S. security. And that's true. But the people who voted for him in 2024 did so exactly because they wanted no more of these wars. The Republican base is still holding at around 75% support. But if this drags on for months, that number could collapse very quickly. Today, Trump repeated again. We plan to finish the main phase in 3 to 4 weeks. And here comes the biggest, most painful question that hardly anyone dares to ask out loud. What happens after those 4 weeks? What exactly will allow the White House to declare victory and stop the bombing? A lot of people in the administration seem to believe that massive missile barrages, destruction of key nuclear facilities, and possibly the elimination of several top regime figures, we already know the supreme leader is gone, will automatically trigger a chain reaction, popular uprising, chaos, collapse of power. But can an uprising really happen while bombs are still falling? That sounds like fantasy. Imagine holding elections or a referendum in the United States while missiles and drones are flying overhead. It's impossible. People hide in shelters. They don't march in the streets with signs. And here's another critical unanswered question. What will the United States do if, a month or 6 weeks from now, the Iranian regime is still standing, refuses to make concessions, still holds significant stocks of enriched uranium, and, most importantly, is now led by even more radical, vengeful figures? People ready to retaliate for the death of their predecessors, and do it with a nuclear strike on Israel. That's exactly what Trump wants to prevent at all costs. In other words, there is still no publicly articulated Plan B for the scenario where no uprising happens or it is brutally crushed. Now, let's look at what Iran itself is doing. They aren't just defending, they are deliberately and very aggressively widening the conflict. Trump himself called it a surprise. Strikes on Persian Gulf countries, oil refineries, airports, hotels, U.S. military bases in Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain, UAE, Qatar. This means Washington and Tel Aviv were not prepared for this turn of events. Everyone was bracing exclusively for massive attacks on Israel, counting Iranian missiles, Iron Dome interceptors, David Sling, Arrow systems. Now part of the drones and missiles are flying in completely different directions, and this is already a different war. Economic, political, energy. Oil and gas prices have already spiked, and this is just the beginning. Qatar has sharply cut production. Saudi Arabia is nervous. Tanker routes are under threat. Europeans were still dreaming of a full embargo on Russian oil as early as April 2026. Now that's hanging in the air. Expensive fuel will hit every American wallet. Gasoline, groceries, air tickets, shipping costs, everything gets more expensive. This changes political moods not only in the US, but in Europe, Asia, Latin America. Investment appeal of the Gulf is collapsing before our eyes. Trump's money, his family's money, millions of American retirees' savings, European funds, all of it is at risk. Dubai and Abu Dhabi are in panic. Doha is in shock. And in Bahrain, where a Shiite majority lives under a Sunni monarchy, this is pure dynamite. There were already serious protests during the Arab Spring. Iran is going even further. Drones hit the British base at Akrotiri on Cyprus. Reports of strikes on other European targets. This isn't madness. It's cold calculation. Iran wants to drag Europe into the conflict, so missiles start flying there too. Not in massive salvos, but enough to terrify. They have long-range ballistic missiles, possibly with Chinese or Russian help. No massive bombardment of Berlin or Warsaw, but isolated strikes on U.S. bases in Europe are a very real threat. This conflict is no longer confined to the Middle East. It's globalizing right in front of us. Friends, we are at the epicenter of events that could become the prelude to something far bigger. No one planned that just days after the start of a swift operation, we would already be talking about a long, exhausting campaign. A shortage of interceptors, destruction in Dubai, strikes on Cyprus, and an economic crisis across the Persian Gulf. If you're not subscribed to the channel yet, please do it right now. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and write in the comments what you think. Will Trump manage to wrap this war up quickly, or are we sliding into a multi-year crisis? Support our men and women in uniform, the U.S. Armed Forces, Israel, and all our allies who are holding the line right now. And use the channel support tools. Thanks to you, we keep growing and can keep having these important conversations. Thank you for watching and sticking with me during these tough times. Victory will be ours. Stay strong, America. God bless us all.